Today is October 1st and I should have filmed this a couple of days ago, but as you can see, I'm in another new location. I am house sitting in the Bristol area. I just haven't had a minute to sit down and film this, but I can say that for the month of September, I was absolutely feral for reading. I genuinely think the only part of my personality of September is me with a book. Either me with my Kindle or me with my headphones on. I feel so sorry for my husband. I feel like all he saw was me with these on. Fun, but I'm excited to talk about everything that I read. I've got my trusty dusty bestie and my other trusty dusty because I fear this may be a long one. I'm gonna do my best to not drag it out, but like, I read a lot. So we'll start with my book stats. I read 33 books. Well aware this is beyond the norm and I'm not working full time. So when I say I read, I mean like I read all day, every day for a month. So I read 33 books. I read 12,726 pages. My average rating was a 3.9, which is lower than I would like it to be. I feel like when it's sitting in the threes, it's because I'm not picking very good books. I'm also very hard to get fives from. So I would ideally like it to be in the fours. So I'm hoping to read better books in the month of October. However, saying that if you've seen my October TBR, you also know that I've picked books that I think I'm gonna hate. So that's probably not gonna happen. Anyway, I digress. The number of 5-star reads I had was 3. Pretty proud of that. And I read 8 different genres. When I'm looking at this, I read some contemporary books, I read historical fiction, I read a lot of romance, okay? I read some fantasy, I read a couple of novellas, I read some graphic novels, I read some young adult books, and I read some memoirs and some non-fiction self-help books. So my reading was kind of all over the place, which I think is why I was able to just be so in for reading. So the first book I read for the month was my book club choice, and that was Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. This book has so much heart. If you told me that I was going to be feeling weepy over an octopus and his love that he develops for a 70-year-old woman, I would not have believed you. So this book follows Tova. She's a woman surrounded by love and she's surrounded by loss, and she's actually just trying to get through the day and cope with all that she's been dealt with. She is very much in the grieving process. She's taken a shining to a giant Pacific octopus that lives in the aquarium, and she works at this aquarium and cleans it each night, and she discovers that he's been sneaking out, and basically she like doesn't tell on him. She almost like looks after him. She befriends him and keeps a secret. So together they form this beautiful bond that ultimately leads to Tova discovering what happened the night her son died. It just deals with grief and friendship and found family so beautifully. I read it all in one sitting because it was just so easy to absorb and just go into that world. And I actually loved Marcellus, which is the octopus. His point of view had me giggling. Like, he was so snarky. He was almost giving like Grumpy Sunshine. I would love to see this adapted into a film. Like, this is a solid 4-star read from me. I highly recommend it. I can see why it's on so many people's book clubs, because what a fun book to read and then talk about. I actually rang my sister once I knew she'd read it so that I could be like, right, like what did you think? How did you take this part? It's such a good book to discuss. The next book I read for the month was my sister's book club choice, and that was The Woman by Kristen Hanna. This has been on my TBR for ages, so I was really, really excited that she picked this, but my gosh, this book was heavy. There was so much pain and grief and loss and rage from the characters and from me. I had a lot of rage with this book. It deals with PTSD in such an eye-opening way. Like, I actually really felt the anger and the despair and the frustration that Frankie was going through as she was navigating every bad thing that happened in her life. And like, we're not just talking one bad thing. This poor woman. This is an easy 5 stars from me. I didn't really have have to think about it, it gave me all of those feels. I was so enraged when everyone was acting like Frankie shouldn't be suffering from PTSD because she wasn't actually in combat, or telling her that there was no woman in Vietnam. This was making me so angry. Like, my husband was reading this at the same time as me, and I had to keep checking myself and checking in with him because I was like, oh my gosh, can you believe people dealt with this? Then you add in all those opinions and all the like judgmental people that hadn't experienced what Frankie had but felt that they had a right to like abuse her. Just thank goodness for friends, because her friends stood by her and they were the only ones that understood what she was going through. The last third of the book was rough. There were so many things happening that had me questioning, like, what would I actually do if I was in that situation? Like, should we always do the right thing because we think it's the right thing? Like, I just kept asking myself over and over again, like, what would I do if this was the hand that I was dealt? Don't even start me on the parents. I wanted to dive into the book and shake them. Like, the idea of putting the pain away and just getting over with and just get on with your life after all she had been through was wild to me. Being asked to forget and move on, being ridiculed for being part of a generation that just wants to like talk it out. Thank goodness therapy exists now. Thank goodness we normalize that. And just when I thought I'd predicted what was going to happen next, let's just say I had no idea. Let's just say I was completely blindsided. Let's just say I was fooled at every corner. I think shame is such a silent killer. Stories like this are so important. I think they need to be told. I just kept thinking about all the poor women that lived this experience. Like, it was such a devastating read, and Kristen Hanna is such a phenomenal writer. She's one of those authors that if she writes it, I'm reading it. It's going straight on my TBR. It doesn't even matter what it's about. I'm gonna read it. So fantastic, 5 stars, 10 stars. I read Daydream by Hannah Grace. This book was so perfect for me. Like, I feel like this book was written for me. I have never felt more seen in 2 characters than I did in this book. It was a solid 4-star read. It started with the author's note about not including a diagnosis for Henry, and the rationale behind that actually had me tearing up before I'd even started the book. I see so much of myself in Henry. It was kind of like a breath of fresh air, but also made me feel sad that not everybody's brains are like this, and how hard it is when you have ADHD or you have autism to be in there. And to know that some people just have quiet blows my mind. When he was feeling overstimulated and then still trying to hang out with his friends, I felt such a strong connection and understanding for that. And then the flip side to Henry is I'm also the eldest daughter, and I am a people pleaser to my core. So I just don't feel like I've ever read 2 characters that are more me coded than this book right here, which is what I love about Hannah Grace, that she puts these like little bits of herself and her heart into her characters, and I identify with all of them. Like, at this stage, I just know that we would be the bestest of friends. Like, you can't write those characters and then we can't not be friends. Like, we just work. So as far as the plot goes, it was so fun. I don't want to give any spoilers away, but I think Henry was the greatest gift giver. Like, that's the title I'm awarding him. And he has the best one-liners. Like, his non-filtered thoughts were so refreshing. I feel so blessed that I got to read this story. I really loved it. The girlhood in this book is strong as well. It might actually be my favorite part, the girlhood, because to be seen and heard and looked after by women, there's nothing greater than that to me as a girl. Women showing up for women always just has me like kicking my feet and being really happy. So it made me miss all my friends back home in New Zealand, I'm not gonna lie, but it also made me excited at the prospect of finally settling down in a city and getting to make more. The next book I read for the month was Love Redesigned by Lauren Asher. This story was fun, it was flirty. I was rooting for the redemption of Julian from pretty early on. He was dealing with the loss of his father, and he didn't handle himself well in his early 20s, which resulted in him ruining his potential romantic relationship and actually his friendship with Dahlia, which is our 2 main characters. So then we're fast forwarding, and years later, Dahlia is returning home. She's had a really devastating and public breakup, and Julian is a very single billionaire. One thing I loved about Julian is he is just a giant green flag. Like, he was super sensitive and empathetic to exactly how Dahlia was feeling and coping with her anxiety and depression. Like, tick, tick, tick. Dahlia was a little harder to stomach in the first half of the book because she was a bit too much like a petulant child stomping around and having tantrums. And we got there in the end, but I just didn't connect with her. She just wasn't quite the female character that I tend to like, especially when I was coming straight off of Daydream into this. It was quite polarizing. I don't know what it is about Lauren Ash's characters, but I don't seem to connect with them like I do with other authors. It might be because I'm not a billionaire and I don't know what it would be like to be a billionaire, but for some reason they just aren't as relatable to me. It also could be like the completely different cultural differences. I don't know. It's just something for me just doesn't sit right with these characters. But it doesn't really make any sense because they deal with themes in the books that like I like or that I've experienced myself. So I don't know why, but something just doesn't hit for me with her books. The chemistry was great. They had like gritty issues that they were dealing with, which is what I like in a romance book. Their friends and family were likable. They had a borderline like criminal prank war going on, and I thought that was wildly entertaining. But for me, this just sits in the 3-star category. Probably 3.5 if I'm being nice, but I'll read the next one because the next female main character is a nanny, and when you have a single dad and a nanny, that's dopamine for my brain, so I've got to read that. It was good, but I'm not on the like Lauren Asher hype train, I guess. However, the next book I read for the month is Wild Eyes by Elsie Silver. This book is everything. I highly recommend you listen to the audiobook because it's such a treat, and I don't want to give any spoilers away. I know there's lots of stuff on TikTok about it, so it could have been spoiled for you, but the audiobook is worth it, is what I will say. Before I break it down, I'm going to tell you now that it is a 5-star read, without a question. Skylar Stone is a famous country star whose life blows up, and she pretty much just realizes that her life is no longer her own. She's not actually making any decisions. Nobody there is like looking after her. So everyone that's supposed to care about her and supposed to like have her best interests at heart, she's just lost who she truly is. She leaves everything behind and runs away to Rose Hill to try find her own sound and record an album with Ford Grant, who is the main character in book 1. Then in waltzes West Belmont, quite literally saving her from a grizzly bear, and then slowly builds her up with experiences and showing her what like a loving family is supposed to look like. West is actually the best dad. He's a perfect partner. He's also pure filth. Like the spice rating on this, I felt like I was reading it like, those scenes had me blushing. I also then had to text my sister because she was planning to listen to it at work, and I had to tell her, no, because if one of your headphones disconnects in the office, you will lose your job. So the spice rating, fabulous. Skylar is funny. She's sassy, confident, and I love that we see her build herself up piece by piece throughout this book. Thankfully, these pieces also include West and his 2 beautiful children. They gave such comedic moments. Like Elsie Silver really writes funny, lovable kids that have the best banter, who actually add to the story. Like they're not just there. It's like you care about these kids as well. So we got the funny moments, but we also got these like tender, sweet moments as well, which we really needed because we get to see Skylar's inner child heal. And that, I think for me, that's what made it a 5-star read, that we're just seeing so much growth, and it was just beautiful. I love seeing Skylar get stronger and stronger and take back what was hers. She grew, she changed, she evolved. It was an absolute treat to read. I just think Elsie Silver is the queen of banter. She's the queen of chemistry. Like, what a perfect little family. The ending of the book absolutely took it to 5 stars for me. I'm pretty sure I felt like I had that 5-star feeling most of the book, but the ending, I don't want to give it away, but I was smiling so big. Honestly, Coach Thick Thighs and Fancy Face forever. The next book I read for the month was Drive by Kate Stewart. This is a really tricky one for me to review because I actually despise a love triangle, which I should probably have known before I actually picked it up, but it's been sitting in my Audible library for about 6 years. So I just decided to bite the bullet and go in blind because I love the Ravenhood series. I knew I liked Kate Stewart's writing, so I thought, I'll trust. This story follows Stella, She's a music-obsessed budding journalist and she's navigating love and heartbreak in her early 20s, so sounds like it should be good. She's a really sassy character who we see lose a little bit of her spark as she battles through all the hardships that the book throws at her. And we have 2 love interests. We have Reed, who has demons of his own he's fighting, and a sketchy, somewhat dangerous past. He's a little bit toxic in his emotional whiplash, and he is a drummer in a band. And then we have Nate, who's a little bit older than Stella, and he's the owner of like an indie newspaper that Stella wants to write for as a stepping stone to bigger publications. So you kind of have a little bit of like, he's her boss, so there's a little bit of a power dynamic there as well, where they both basically aren't good. So there's that. There's so much angst with Reed, like lots of fighting, pushing each other, and then there's this like magnetic pull that somehow just keeps pulling them back together. No matter how toxic it gets, they end up in each other's orbit. Nate's definitely the safer option because he treats Stella with lots of love and respect, but her dreams in that process go a little bit stagnant, and she kind of just fits into his world. Both the guys were great in the end. I could have, they were okay. I guess my struggle is I didn't really feel like there was a clear winner the entire time. Like, I had no clue who she was driving home to, and it just kind of made me feel antsy not knowing. Like, I know who I was rooting for, and thankfully that was the ending that I got. But this book is just a 3-star for me because it wasn't for me. It was just incredibly slow. It was a slow in the middle and then rushed at the end. With that being said, I don't want to read the next one. I just want to be told what happens because I know it's about the next generation. So it's about the children of the 2 that end up together. I don't want to read it. I just want someone to tell me what happens. Do with that information. The next book I read in the month was Practice Makes Perfect by Sarah Adams. I think I might have like a new favorite author coming into the mix because Sarah Adams has done it again. This was so fun and cutesy, and I was actually hooked from the beginning. I mean, the cover is gorgeous. I should have picked this up sooner because it actually has so many of my favorite tropes. We've got fake dating. We've got girl gets sick and boy looks after her. We've got small town and happy family dynamics. It is a perfect quick read. It was such an easy 4 stars from me. We have Annie Walker. She's a flower shop owner. What girlie doesn't want to own a flower shop? So tick, tick, tick. She's the family peacekeeper. She's the town's resident good girl. And then we have Will, and he's like this sexy, tattooed, commitment adverse bodyguard. Annie wants a no strings attached dating coach that she can practice not being awkward around, and Will is happy to be that for her because Will basically doesn't want anybody else near her, but he's not ready to admit that yet. But he doesn't want any commitment. Like, he's so commitment adverse. However, this doesn't really work because Annie's not awkward around Will at all. In fact, she's completely and utterly herself, and he's probably the only person that she's her real authentic self around. He's probably the first person that gets the unfiltered Annie. These 2 are a match made in heaven. The banter was great, the chemistry was spot on, and there was some really funny and heartfelt moments, and I just really like the story. If you are feeling like you're getting into a slump, I would recommend this book because it was just quick and so cutesy. Okay, the next book I read in the month was Defend the Dawn by Bridget, I never know how to say this, Kemmerer? I'm so sorry. It had been so long since I read the first book in the series that I had to really think back to what happened. I remembered that I liked it, and I remembered that it had good twists and turns, and I've wanted to read this one for a while, and I kept putting it off, and then I think I put it off for so long that I kind of lost interest. But I think I must have been in a bit of a fantasy mood in order to pick this up, because usually when I'm in like my romance reading mood, it's because I don't want to think. So I know that when I read fantasy, I have to be in the mood to think. So this is book 2 in the Defy the Night series, and we're back in the kingdom of Kandala, and we're following on from the aftermath of book 1. So this book was all about seeking unity between the royal and the rebel factions and looking for like a new source of life-saving elixir needed for the citizens of Kandala. But in true fantasy fashion, not everybody is who they seem to be. This book had good pacing, it started strong, but I just found myself getting really frustrated with Tessa and Coric's lack of communication. I can't stand miscommunication trope on the best of days. And these two just kept making assumptions about what the other one was thinking and feeling, and actually just never addressed it. They just never had an adult conversation. And I get that you need to build tension, and that's the point of miscommunication, but in this book, it actually just annoyed me. It ended on quite a cliffhanger. I probably shouldn't have waited so long to pick the book up because I didn't have any emotional connection to the characters anymore. I just wanted to speed read through it so I could tick it off my list. And I actually don't think I'm going to read the last book. I will probably just Google the outcome. So for that reason, this book gets 3 stars from me. Wasn't bad, wasn't good, it was so-so. Snack break! The next book I read for the month was Atomic Habits by James Clear. This is a really hard book for me to review because when I was thinking about like writing down what I liked about it, I actually just had a bunch of random bullet points of like my takeaways from it. So I really liked this book. I really needed to read this book this month because my lack of working and my house sitting around England has really resulted in no routine. And it's really easy when you don't have a solid routine for bad habits to creep in. And I could feel that starting to happen. So to understand this book, it really unpacks like what atomic habits are and how they're the building blocks to achieve remarkable results. It talks about your behaviors relating to habits, whether they're good or bad. And the thing I took away from it the most was understanding that your habits are broken down into 4 parts, that you have a cue, you have a craving, you have a response and a reward. And that the problem phase is the cue and the craving, and that the solution phase is the response and the reward. And it really unpacked that for me in quite a good way, that I could recognize like, oh, well, when I hear my husband open the fridge, the cue is, oh, he's eating something. And then my brain goes, well, what can I eat? And then that starts a craving of what snacks have I got that I can eat because I want something quick. And then what my response and what my reward is to that. So that's just one example. There's so many of them, like good cues, bad cues. And it really just helped me think about refocusing my goals, thinking about what systems I have in place, how to make the goals that I want to achieve easier, and then helping the habits that I want to break, making them harder. So I really liked that. It made me think about what my daily habits are. It made me think about raising my level of awareness to like a conscious level of what I'm actually doing in my day and how to just like make better choices. So she says as she sits here with her 2 bad choices. I did walk to the little shop to get this. That was less than 100 meters away from where I am, so I'm a work in progress, okay? I'm just a little whip. The next book I read for the month was Gleam by Raven Kennedy. Finally bit the bullet and picked up the 3rd book in the series of the Play to Prisoner series. Why did I wait so long? Honestly, the pacing, the action, the tension, the drama of this book was fantastic. This is such an easy 4 stars to me. It's actually more like a 4.5. It was almost a 5. Can't go too much into the plot without spoiling any of book 1 and 2. But basically we have a girl who is completely gold head to toe, and everything she touches turns into gold. And she is kept in a gilded cage by King Midas, someone who she once loved and adored very much. She gets kidnapped and she basically has this whole like bad bitch awakening. This book is the awakening from start to finish. King Midas is the ultimate ick of a human being. Like, I needed Oren to absolutely eliminate him because he's so slimy and gross. He was smug, he was evil, he was absolutely vile. I don't know that, like, it takes a lot for me to really hate a book character. I hated one, and Kristen Hanna's the woman, and I hated this man as well. I wrote here that I actually think I'm going to be picking up the next book within the week. I didn't. I read this in the first week of September. I didn't. I have it. I have it ready to go, but I didn't. But I really do need to know what happens next because the last 20% of this book was so action-paced. Like, I couldn't get through it fast enough. I was flicking that Kindle page. There's quite a few loose ends, and to be honest, I think the next book is probably going to be a lot more filler to tidy some of that up, so I'm mentally preparing myself for that. But if you haven't picked up the Play to Prisoner series, I will warn you, book 1, woefully underwhelming. Book 2, incredible. Book 3, incredible. Book 1 is not great. Persevere. It'll be worth it. The next book I read was a photo finish by Elsie Silver, my second Elsie Silver book for the month. I am back in on this series. I forgot that book 2 was about Violet Eaton. You are my kind of girl. She's sweet, she's caring, she's stubborn as hell, and she is beyond determined to make a name for herself in the jockey world, all while getting out from her overbearing father and brothers. Whoop. I found myself smiling anytime the Eaton boys were mentioned. I was really hoping they would get more of a cameo, but I'm guessing that they weren't actually fully fleshed out characters at this stage in the Silververse. These books come before then. Cole, on the other hand, he was a real tough nut to crack. Like, he was so closed off and guarded, rightfully so, after all he went through, but he's actually beyond grumpy. Like, he keeps everyone at arm's length and he uses his rudeness as a defense mechanism. The man is like the ultimate recluse. And the way these two meet is quite less than conventional, but it makes for a really interesting love connection and some quite steamy scenes. So Trixie, Cole's therapist, she was such a gorgeous character. I was actually cracking up whenever she popped in, showed up on the pages. She called him on his crap and I loved her for it. And then there were the scenes of the hiking trip. They were everything. I actually loved those. That was the catalyst for Cole's healing journey, and I just loved it. I give this book a beautiful 4 stars, and I need to pick up the next one in the series Ace. You can see that I have an issue with starting series and then just not finishing them. I say I'm gonna pick them up and then I get new, shiny, interesting books. Next book I read for the month was Play Along by Liz Tomforty. I absolutely adore the Windy City series and the world. Like, these characters are absolute perfection. And Isaiah Rhodes and Dr. Kennedy Rhodes are now part of the club. I just devoured it. I happily give this book 4 stars. It was so easy. What a sweet, sweet little love story. Isaiah is the most gorgeous golden retriever of a man. She really knows how to write men. He's been crushing on our girl Kenny for years, and after a drunken night in Vegas, they find themselves married and having to play along, hence the book title, with the charade so that Kennedy's actually able to keep her job. This book was borderline on the lack of communication. I was getting quite frustrated, but it was always explained with really valid, totally reasonable excuses. But it was just pushing the line for me to where I was starting to get annoyed. I lived, laughed, loved all the banter. The book is just a giant green flag. Kenny deserves the world. Her family sucks. Isaiah deserves a happy ending. The scenes with the storms were beautiful, and then it just made me adore the cover even more. I love it when a book does that, when you're like, oh yeah, that cover's cute, and then when you've read the book and you're like, oh, I get it. I love that. Baby Rio being next is going to be everything. Once again, I don't know why I put this off. I don't know why it took me so long to pick it up. It was such a fun read, but also, side note, can we get a Monty book? Because I would eat that up. I'm all for, I will read a romance where about a 60-year-old man finding a new love. Yes, please. Is he 60? Is he older? I don't know. Give me the Monty book. I'll take the Baby Rio book. Also give me the Monty book. Even just give me the Monty novella, okay? I'll have that. The next book I read for the month was Forget Me Not by Julie Soto. Julie Soto she just has a way with words. Last month I read Not Another Love Story, and I knew that I needed to pick up her other book because I absolutely adored that one. So we have Amma, who is a wedding planner, whose mother has been married so many times that she, at this stage in her life, is just completely closed off to the possibility of entering any kind of monogamous relationship. Then we have Elliot, and he's a florist who hates being a florist most of the time, and he's been burdened with his father's flower shop, and he's working in the wedding industry, and he finds himself completely captivated by Amma's zest for life. The two hook up for some time, but it kind of all just goes to custard, and now we are some years on. And Amma is getting her big break with a really high-end client, but the catch is she has to work with Elliot again, which is one of her big clients, one of their few non-negotiables. Don't even get me started on this man's tattoos and the meaning behind them. I would be a puddle of goo just for that alone. This book is completely hinged on crappy communication. And I'm not normally a second chance romance girly, which is why I did end up only giving this 3 stars. I just found myself thinking hurry up and just tell each other how you feel. For way too much for the book, I was just thinking if you guys just said how you feel, we could move beyond this. I did enjoy all of the flower chat, and I found myself visualizing all the pretty displays and how like good the arrangements sounded. I also found the couple that the main wedding was hinged around, I found them quite painful. And it's so hard because I loved Not Another Love Song, and I do appreciate the little nod to Xander in this book, but this one didn't quite hit the same for me, which is a real shame. But I will try another one of hers. The next book I read for the month was Christina Lauren's The Paradise Problem. This was a fun premise for a book and the ultimate escapism. Like in a nutshell, you have this uber rich family and they're jetting off to like a private tropical island for a wedding. West is the heir to a grocery chain and he needs his ex-wife Anna to pose as his spouse for a 5-year inheritance clause. Anna was once a pre-med student and she's now a struggling artist, so she reluctantly agrees to help. And the ex-wife thing is questionable, but you learn that she's not really his ex-wife. You learn that really early on in the book. But this was such a fun 4.5-star read. The Weston family, they are a nightmare. Like, having such a narcissistic father has created like a real war zone dynamic in the family. You've got the older brother who's so competitive it's unhealthy, and the youngest brother who is the peacekeeper who's just trying to smooth things over all of the time, but he's almost like a jokester to the point where it's like you're just silly and annoying. Given all of this, I actually found Liam's mum. Oh, I say Liam. His name's Liam Weston. I've called him West and now I'm calling him Liam. That's really confusing. Okay, but I actually found Liam's mum to be an equally hard character because she's really mean and condescending. And the problem with her is she knew she was doing it. Liam's dad, however, takes the cake. Like, he's actually diabolical. Like, unforgivably, cut you out my life forever, never speak again, you do not get a redemption arc, diabolical. The banter was funny, the pink hair was iconic, such a fun book to like be on Pinterest for. The chemistry felt real because it was actually a nice slow build. And the thing that helped this book be a 4.5 stars, you actually could have removed all of the smut from the book and I still would have been all in for these two characters. Like, I was rooting for them. The little scene where there's the showers and the calm down, I peaked too, had me smiling. At that stage, I knew I was going to love the book because the banter and the chemistry was on point. I also loved Blair. She was unhinged in the best of ways. She's like the unfiltered auntie that always has too much to drink, says what everybody's thinking and what everybody wanted to say, but if she was your mum, you'd be so embarrassed. I really, really enjoyed this one. I'm really glad I picked this up. I think this stopped me from slumping because it was so fun and fast-paced. The next book I read for the month was a novel love story by Ashley Poston. I'm going to really struggle to review this one. Let's start by saying that I give it 3 stars. For the first half of the book, it was sitting at a 2-star read for me. I was just so bored. I think I've discovered that I'm not really a magical realism girly. The few books that I've read within the genre have done nothing for me. So I think that moving forward, if I see magical realism as the genre, I'm just gonna skip it. But in this book, our female main character is a literature professor and she finds herself stranded in the fictional town of her favorite romance series. As she helps the town kind of like reach its storybook ending, she clashes with the grumpy bookstore owner who seems determined to stop her and is kind of the only person that knows that she's not meant to be there. I should have loved this because the premise of that is incredible. Like, I love the concept of that. It's such a fun, unique concept that I feel like should have been done before. Maybe it has been, but I'm surprised it hasn't been done. You sort of have the lines between fiction and reality, they start to blur, and the female main character realizes that the happy ending from her own story depends on finishing the story of the town and finding out what the ending of that story should be. I did predict the twists, the secrets, the plot and the turns and stuff quite early on, so that it was still a really nice, sweet reveal, and that is what bumped the book up for me because I liked what it was trying to do. I think my biggest issue is I didn't believe in the chemistry between the two characters at all. Like, not even a little bit did I think that these two characters were attracted to each other and it would work. I do love the cover. I think the color choices would make anybody pick this up off a bookshelf. Like, if I hadn't read this and I saw this in a bookstore, it would be going straight in my basket. I've now read 3 Ashley Poston books and I've only liked one of them. So I think that maybe this author just isn't for me, and that's okay. I know a lot of people love it. I really wanted to love it, but it just didn't hit for me. The next book I read this month was The Mistake by Elle Kennedy. I'm so late to this series that I wondered, like, should I just skip it altogether? But I am determined to get through it because I really want to get to the Graham Diaries, and I feel like I need to know this world first before I touch that. So we have hockey star John Logan. He's used to getting any girl that he wants, except the one he pined over in book 1, Miss Hannah Wells. That's a whole other issue. But after a careless comment, he pushes the love interest, Grace, away, and he's really determined to win her back. But Grace is wiser, she's more confident now, like she's really gonna make him work for it after she sort of disappears for the summer. And she is not falling for Logan's charms as easily as she probably would have before. And I do love that she made him work. I liked Logan. I thought he was a pretty good male lead. He had some trauma he was working through. He did actually genuinely change his ways, and I do feel like he genuinely liked Grace once he decided that she was the one for him. He was thoughtful, and he really did care about people in his life. So he had quite a nice redemption arc. Grace is also great. I liked seeing her get a backbone and set boundaries. She also had like a really good sense of humor. She just surrounded herself with really crappy friends, which is such a shame. I think Elle Kennedy's strengths as an author lies in her making believable and likable characters. But is it normal to knock on the wrong dorm room door and end up hooking up? Is that a thing? Like, I just feel like that was so far from my like university college experience. It's the only part where I was like, what? This wouldn't happen. Like, but maybe it would. We're in a different time now. I definitely preferred the deal more just because it had a bit more likable spark. Like the character, I was just more into the characters, but this was good. I rated it 3 stars. That still sits. It was okay. The next book I read for the month was Born of Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. I could just sit here like this for 5 minutes and that would be my full review. I was so nervous going into this book. It was a 37-hour audiobook, so I knew it was going to be a massive time sink. And I was okay with that. I couldn't remember how the last book left off at all. And my sister was telling me about book 2 because she was reading that pretty much at the same time I was reading this. And it just did not jog any memories at all. So I was really worried that I was going to spend like the first 30% trying to piece together what had happened, but I actually felt like I picked it up quite quickly. In this book, we have Sarah, who is confronting her dark past while preparing to become the queen of the gods alongside Nyktos. She's working to unite the courts against Colas. She is uncovering her true powers of her bloodline, blah, 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 all that fantasy stuff, right? I'm giving this 2 stars. I'm not even going to go into the plot. This felt like reading a book about 2 horny teenagers who go to war. I didn't hate it when it was happening. I just wasn't having the best time. I hate it now. I'm not gonna lie, I hate it now. The first 30% was just like Sarah suppressing her trauma, scheming, talking in circles, trying to decipher this prophecy. And then like we as the audience were just being drip fed information like we were dumb, like we couldn't possibly work it out for ourselves. It was painful. I actually got to the point where I was skipping over the smut scenes because they were pointless and like so frequent. I just thought, where's the plot? I'm so happy to be done with it. I will say one positive I have is that I was satisfied with the outcome/retribution that a certain character was dealt. I was pleased with that. But this book did not need to be as long as it was. I think this is another reason why I avoid reading the last book in a series, because I'm so unsatisfied with this one. Like, I loved the start of this series. I actually got to the end and I was so annoyed, and I can't even discuss it without spoilers, but what an absolute waste. Like, it makes me not want to read the next Blood and Ash. I wrote like a little note to myself because I know that once my sister reads it, I'm going to go back to this and read her my little blurb about how this is the most unsatisfying ending to a series I think I've ever read. I almost could 1-star it, but I tend to reserve my 1 stars for books that I DNF. And I read all 37 hours. I didn't read it, I listened to it. I listened to all 37 hours, 2 stars, 2 painful stars. Ugh. Moving on. Next, I read Powerful by Lauren Roberts. This novella takes place between Powerful and Reckless, and I haven't read Reckless yet. It's on my TBR for October because I've been meaning to get to this book, and my sister said that I should read this one, even though I was tempted to skip it. In this one, we have Adina. She's left to survive in the dangerous streets of Loot because Payton is taken into the purging trials. She meets this like mysterious character named Mac who rescues her, and they team up on this quest to reunite with their loved ones. And along the way, their bond is tested, blah, 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 blah. You get it. I like Adina because she's perky and she's so optimistic, and then Mac's quite cynical, but like he's realistic in his cynicism. Skip if you don't want any spoilers. I fully forgot that Adina died in book 1. Like, how did I forget that? So the whole time I was getting so excited about her and Mac, only to be shocked by her death again. Honestly, my book amnesia is so bad sometimes. Like, I actually text my sister and I was like, did she actually die in book 1 or does she come back? And she's like, nope, she's dead. What is the point of this book? The only way I see this novella being of any importance or relevance is if Mac is pivotal in the plot to the rest of the series. Like, did we need to meet Mac because he plays a pivotal role in the future books? Otherwise, you just made me care about a character for nothing. This gets 3 stars. It actually gets 2.75, but I rounded it up to 3 to be kind. When a novella is good, and there is one coming up that I'm going to talk about that is the best novella I've ever read, when it is good, it is great. But sometimes I'm like, what is the point? This is one of those times. Okay, the next book I read for the month was The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King by Carissa Broadbent. Man, I was in my fantasy era. I was really like fall is hit, fantasy's in. I made it my goal to tick off a few big books that I've been avoiding. And there is something about reading fantasy in autumn and the fall because, I don't know, it just works in my brain. It just feels right. This is the second book in the series and we're following Aurea, who she's been betrayed, she's grieving, she's trapped in her own kingdom and she's unable to trust anyone, least of all Rain. He offers her a secret alliance to reclaim her throne and seek revenge, and she has to like harness her powers. So pretty typical fantasy vibes. This was so good. After reading Born of Blood and Ash, this restored my faith in the big fantasy books, okay? Thank goodness I picked this up, because if I didn't, I fear that I would have just written fantasy off forever. It wasn't quite as good as the first book, I will say that, but the tension, the romance, the side characters, the quests, the battles, they were grippingly good. Like, I was invested. I gave this 4.5 stars, just didn't have the 5-star feel, but I'll tell you, it's close. It's so close. But I am thoroughly obsessed. Like, I'm back in this world. I'm ready for the next book in the series. I'm trying to get my sister to read this so that we can talk about it, because it was great. I also love that Rain had no problems begging for what he wanted. Like, this man is perfection. I also didn't realize that Vincent was gonna play such a pivotal role, really important role in the plot of this book, but I really liked that, because you would think we were done with him, but not quite. There's nothing I love more than like a fantasy book tidying up loose ends and giving people redemption, and I feel like this had a lot of that. So I didn't realize as I was reading this that this book was wrapping up Aurea and Rain. I didn't realize that the next book was going to follow a completely different path, but I am still excited for that path. The next book I read was 6 Scorched Roses by Carissa Broadbent. I am going to preface this by telling you that this book gets a glorious 5 stars from me. It is my favorite book of the month. This little novella was my absolute favorite book of the whole month. Can't top it. So we have Lilith, who has been dying since birth, and she's been watching her town succumb to this mysterious illness. So she strikes a desperate deal with a vampire named Vale. She offers him 6 roses for 6 vials of blood, hoping to save her village from this god-cursed plague. As their transaction deepens into something more, Lilith realizes that falling for a vampire could actually be a little bit more dangerous than the curse itself. This novella had no reason to be as good as it was. Dare I say, better than the novel, better than book 2. It was giving True Blood vibes, season 1 True Blood vibes. It didn't even feel like a short story. It was so fleshed out, and it actually added to the larger plot in the world of Nyaxia. I'm so satisfied with this. The plot, the character development, it was perfection. And as far as novellas go, I usually feel like you don't need them, it's just nice to see our characters again, but this one I actually felt like was needed. And I didn't even know I needed it until I read it. It helps me connect with Lilith and Vale so much more. Now, I read it after book 2, because at the end of book 2, it says, go on and read the novella. So I did. And I actually think that's the correct order. So even though if you're on Goodreads, it's 1.5, I think you should read it after book 2, because it just hits a little different. What a fun novella. Authors take notes. This was perfection. I fear I'm hyping it up too much. I loved it. Okay, the next book I read for the month was You Are Home which is a Katana Comics collection book. This is just like a cute little graphic novel. It's the 4th in the series by Katana Comics. I love them. I'm 100% the female character in this book. I sit there chuckling and I show my husband basically every other comic because I'm like, this is our whole relationship. It's a 3 stars from me. This one was fun. I did prefer, there's one of them, I might be the second one in the series. There's one of them that I gave 5 stars to because I absolutely loved it. This was still good. I just needed a quick read after all of my fantasy was rotting my brain. I had to do so much thinking. I needed a non-thinking book. But this delves into like significant milestones in relationships, does like moving in together, facing time apart, officially committing to each other. She turns like the most mundane life tasks like mowing the lawn, deciding who's cooking each night into these like sweet little moments and captures them in the most relatable comics. This was, I believe, free on Kindle Unlimited for me. So it was really like just a nice, quick, easy read. The next book I read was King of Sloth by Anna Huang. We have Xavier, who's charming and wealthy, and he's never like chased anybody until he meets his publicist, Sloane Kensington. And she's really used to handling difficult clients. She finds Xavier like infuriating. He comes across like he has no drive, he's the sloth, and she just is trying to keep everything professional. But as a tragedy occurs, it brings them closer together and the lines between business and pleasure get blurred. I was hooked on this from the get-go. Like, I knew straight away that although this man embodied sloth, he was just deeply hurt and hiding from the world. Like, I clocked that immediately. And Sloane was the girl that was going to pull him out and make him fight for himself. Yes. Xavier's great. He's presented in like a really irresponsible air, but he's so much deeper than that, and we kind of see why he's like that through the trauma that he's faced, and it's quite significant trauma. I like that you have that like Sloane's the black cat grumpy girl. She's witty and like funny, but she's also deeply layered. I will say though, I do hate the whole Ice Queen shtick or label in books about women that guard their hearts. Just because you're not cheery and chipper all of the time, it's just a label I really resent in books. I completely understand why it's used as a trope because it's like an easy way to convey that, but I'm kind of just, I think I'm just starting to resent it. It's like, it's becoming a book ick for me, I think. I'm sick of the redemption arc being like, she finally finds someone she cares about and she's no longer an ice queen. Like what, now she's cured? Like she wasn't fine before? She's completely fine. Like she's perfect the way that she was. Or like, oh, she finally shed a tear, now she's human. No, she was human the whole time. So the Ice Queen thing, that's my only like, I just didn't enjoy that. I'm also obsessed with her fish named Fish, and her sister Georgia sucked. I felt like this book linked really well to Anna Huang's books almost too much. Like it almost felt like we were name dropping all of the other characters so frequently that it kind of felt like an influencer dropping celebrity names. I gave this book 4 stars. It was good. I still really enjoyed it. As I was reading it, I felt like the movie was playing in my head, like it was really great. The line, children aren't always as forgiving as wives, got me good, because ain't that the truth. I am really excited for the next books in the series, and I'm really excited for her book Striker that comes out this month. The next book I read was Out on a Limb by Hannah Bonham Young. This has been on my TBR for such a long time. Like, I keep thinking each month, like, oh, I'll pick it up. This month was the month. We have Wynne, who has prided herself on her independence despite her limb difference. However, she has a one-night stand with the charming Beau, which completely upends her life, leaving her unsure if she can face this new challenge alone. They agree to stay just friends, but soon realize life has other plans for them. I think the reason I avoided this for so long is because I'm really not the biggest fan of like surprise or accidental pregnancy in a book, because I just don't like all the angst surrounding the couple on like whether or not the dad is going to be good or he's going to be like a willing parent, or like, I don't know, it might just hit a little bit too close to home for me. However, this book is beautiful. Like, it had me bawling my eyes out, and if you make me cry, it's 5 stars. Like, this was such an easy 5 stars from me. Beau is a perfect man. He's so sweet. Like, he's just perfection. I think this book healed something for me about 2 parents making an accidental pregnancy work and just being so in love with their child even before the child was born. Like the child always felt like came first. And there are so many small gestures of kindness and love in this book that really had me smiling. The cover is absolutely gorgeous. And I really love how dark the humor was. Like there was quite a few missing limb jokes in there that actually made me laugh out loud. So this is a really special book for me. I would describe it, this book is the kind of book that like when you finish it, it feels like it just gave you a really nice hug. I really adored this. I think it would make a really beautiful film. Could somebody please do that? I would like it. Right, the next book I read for the month was Pashmina by Nidhi Charnani. Oh, I butchered that so bad. I'm so sorry. I just needed a really cute little graphic novel. I read it in a day. I was feeling quite like down. I had terrible cramps. I wasn't in a reading mood at all, but I just didn't want to lose my momentum because I'd been doing really well with one book a day. And I didn't feel like reading at all. So I was like, right, I'm just going to read a graphic novel and then my brain will mentally be like, we read something. So we have Priyanka and she's full of questions about her mother's past in India, especially about her unknown father. But her mum just refuses to talk about it. So we know there's some trauma there. And when Pri discovers a magical pashmina hidden in a suitcase, she's transported to like this vibrant and mysterious version of India, which is really cool visually because it's like quite like beige tonal and then it goes really bright when the pashmina comes up. So to uncover the truth, Pri must confront the secrets her mother left behind and find the family she never knew. I gave this 3.5 stars. The art style was beautiful. I liked all the messages and morals. It was a quick read. There was just not really anything like crazy special, but like I enjoyed it. It was fine. Next, I listened to The Third Gilmore Girl by Kelly Bishop. So this is her memoir that is reflecting on her 6-decade career. And it goes from her like original Tony Award-winning dancing role in Chorus Line to her iconic performance as Emily Gilmore in The Gilmore Girls. And she shares stories from her life as she transitions from dance to drama, but also talks about like her personal struggles, her advocacy for women's rights, and the loss of her second husband to cancer. The foreword was so sweet and it made me really excited to read this memoir because the person that wrote about her, like it would be so nice to have someone say such lovely things about you to the world and telling the world why they love you and adore you. So sweet. I really enjoyed hearing about her rise to fame. Obviously the chapters about Gilmore Girls and Dirty Dancing were the best because I also loved hearing like how the book got its name. And to be honest, the title is what made me pick it up. If the book had been called what she originally was going to call it, I don't know that I would have picked this book up. She has suffered like a lot of personal loss, illness, hardship. She's a really strong, resilient person. I really look forward to seeing what else she does with her career because she has faced some stuff. Now, as far as memoirs go, it's just a 3-star for me. It wasn't bad. It just wasn't up there with some of my other favorite memoirs. It was just okay, so 3 stars from me. Next, I decided that Kristen Hanna clearly hadn't hurt me enough this month and I went back in for seconds. So I read The Four Winds. In 1934, in Texas, we have Elsa Martinelli and she faces the devastation of the Dust Bowl, which is where farmers were basically struggling to survive because all the crops were failing and there was this massive drought. And as a result of this, a lot of people headed west to California in search of a better life. This book really had me ready to fight the characters. Within the first few chapters, like rage-worthy scenes. I love girlhood and I'm so thankful that I'm a woman in today's time because I wouldn't have survived in the 20s and 30s because God forbid my worth be tied to who I could marry and that I would be forced to listen to my father. Ooh, absolute ooh. This book was really sad and not like you get redemption and all is well and let's wrap it up in a nice little bow. Like it was a tragedy start to finish. This one hurt my heart. The mother-daughter bond was truly special. They enjoyed so much together. And I think no matter what kind of relationship you have with your mother, there's always going to be things that you wish you said and wish you didn't say at certain points of your life. And this touches on that really, really well. Like when you're that teenager and you say cruel things to your mum, oh, hurts my heart. Now, I didn't know much about the Great Depression or the Dust Bowl prior to reading this, but I had no idea that Americans turned on their fellow Americans in the way that they did. Like, calling them migrants and okies and treating them like they were diseased and beneath them. I found that really shocking and confronting. Taking advantage of them because they needed basic necessities to survive and paying them 40 cents a day for 10 hours of like hardcore labor is wild to me. Like absolutely wild. This kind of like extreme poverty was really difficult for me to connect with. I don't quite know what it is for me, but I loved The Nightingale, I loved The Great Alone, I loved The Woman. This book didn't quite hit for me. It's probably my least favourite Kristen Hanna book so far to date. I think it was just a bit of a slog to get through, and the constant like kicking people when they were down, and I had too many unanswered questions. Like I got to the end of it and I still had lots of things that I thought I want to know the outcome to that. Like where's this person, what's happened to this person, like how do we get from here to here? I think for me it's just a 3.5 stars, which makes me really sad because I love Kristen Hanna books and I will still go back and read all of her books. But yeah, this was rough. This was really rough. The next book I read was Beyond the Wand, The Magic and Mayhem of Growing Up a Wizard by Tom Felton. Thank goodness I went from like sad to this because I love a memoir. I wanted something short to read and I'd been meaning to pick this one up for a while. I mean, who doesn't want to get every single ounce of Harry Potter that they can get in their lives? It gives us an inside look at Tom Felton's life on and off the screen, from playing Draco Malfoy to navigating fame as a teenager, and it is so interesting. There's lots of humor. I love that he shares about his early acting gigs. I love that he shares his working experience with legendary actors, his lasting friendships that he formed on the set of Harry Potter, but also how much of like a cheeky little shit he was. It's such a good read. I gave this 4 stars. He just seems incredibly normal and grounded despite everything that's going on. I loved hearing about his family dynamics, and his mum is like the true MVP because she let him do whatever hobbies he wanted. She drove him to all his auditions, flew around the world with him for acting gigs, and she never squashed him at all. And I just think that that's such an important thing at that pivotal age. So when it got to battling addiction and how his life was sort of somewhat spiraling in LA, I was so invested. It was such like raw honesty. And I kept thinking, I really hope that he somehow went back and gave that $20 and more back to the gas station man, because I couldn't stop thinking about this. But I was smiling the whole way through. I thought this was fantastic. I wish like more actors wrote memoirs about their experiences, especially like of all my favorite TV shows and films. That would be really great. The next book I read was The Queens of New York by Elle Shen. I picked this up because I was so intrigued by the cover. Like, how beautiful. The cover is giving Gossip Girl. However, the story is anything but. We have best friends. We have Gia, we have Ariel, and we have Everett. And they are facing like their first summer as friends where they spend it apart. And they're each kind of pursuing different dreams. So we have Everett, she's the Broadway star, and she goes off to the summer camp that's like riddled with cultural issues. We have Ariel, who heads to San Francisco for a STEM scholarship, but she's grieving the loss of her sister. And then we have Gia, who's staying home to help manage her family's responsibilities with their restaurant, but she's sinking under the weight of the pressure from her family, and she's kind of exploring like a new romance. Despite the distances, these girls, their bond is so strong, they help each other through everything. And I love girlhood. So this book actually had me in tears by the end of it, because honestly, girl friendships are elite. Like, I adored Gia. She feels so pressured by her family expectations, but she also doesn't want to rock the boat because she has this like innate need to be the good girl and do the right thing. And that's such the eldest daughter pathway in life. Like, she was a character that I just really, really connected with. Ariel is grieving the death of her sister, and her parents refuse to talk about it. Like, they just want to sweep it under the rug, and it leaves her all alone in her grief. And I just can't imagine, like, I would force my parents to talk about it. I would build a shrine if my sister died, and we'd be talking about her all day, every day. Like, ugh, that blew my mind. And then we've got superstar Everett, and she's off at summer camp, and she's facing so many acts of racism, some large, some small, all racist. And her reaction to this is brilliant. The end game reaction to it. And even though this book had me in tears, it still only gets a 4.5 star rating from me. It just didn't quite have that 5-star feel. I really liked it, but I also feel like it might be one I don't remember I was going to say in a year's time. I probably won't remember it in a month's time. But I do think it would be such an amazing TV show because I think it had such good Asian American representation because all three girls are different Asian ethnicities and it explores it beautifully. It's a lesser known book. I haven't seen it come up on much, but I really, really enjoyed it. And sometimes I just need like a contemporary, less romantic focused read. And this was that. Then I picked up All Too Well by Corinne Michaels. And I did that thing where I have so many books to read and I just went straight to a new release. However, this book was good and it hooked me straight away and I was eating up the grumpy, sassy banter, and sometimes you just need a little small town romance between those big fantasy books, and this is what I needed. We have Lachlan West, who has been Ainsley's brother's best friend and the love of her life since they were little, but he kissed her 4 years ago on the night of his mother's funeral. She fled and they've not spoken since. Hello, miscommunication. Welcome to the chat. But she's now assigned to write an article about former athletes, and her first interview is with him, the grumpy ex-quarterback turned fireman. And she follows him around the small town, and the boundaries start to blur, and even though she needs to leave, she wishes their story could get a different ending. Not to forget, this man is also a single dad to a gorgeous little girl. What a fun, cutesy, easy read. The chemistry was there. We have external tension with the two fathers. There were some real life problems that were in there that they faced really, really well. Lachlan had a big life lesson to learn and he learned it. And Ainsley was just so lovely. Like, I feel like she would be someone I would be friends with in real life. This book was good, but probably not like memorable good. Like, good at the time, I won't remember you in a month. I had a great time reading it. That being said, I really want to know who the next book in the series is going to be about. Like, are we following the Frisbee team? Will we get Ainsley's brother? Like, as much as I won't remember it, I am invested in this little town and all of their little secrets. I gave this book 3 stars. I'm sitting here thinking like, man, that was a bit harsh of me. I really liked it. Maybe like a 3.75. The next book I read for the month was Summer Romance by Annabelle Monaghan. This keeps popping up on my Goodreads feed. Like, I feel like the universe was telling me to pick this up. I started reading it on my Kindle, but I quickly got so obsessed with it that I actually got it on Audible because I wanted to listen to it while I was cleaning the house because I couldn't physically read it fast enough. And we were moving from our previous house sit to our new one. And I had a whole day of like packing my suitcase and stuff, and I just wanted to listen to this. So we have Ali's life has been a total mess. First, she lost her mum, then her husband left her, and she's pretty much sworn off pants with zippers, which I thought was hysterical. But the moment she finally takes her wedding ring off, she has this like total meet cute moment where her dog hilariously sets her up with this guy named Ethan. And her life is quite chaotic, but she's tempted by the idea of like a easy summer romance. And this is not an easy summer romance. This is an all-in love connection. Ali and Ethan have this instant connection, there's tension, and I think it makes the whole relationship and the history that they have really, really believable. Ali's ex-husband is a power-playing douchebag, but at the same time, she acknowledges that she was this like quiet woman that never called him on his douchebag behavior, and it kind of blossomed and evolved over the course of their marriage. I just wish he had more of a redemption arc for his behavior, because I can see why he was the way he was if no one ever called him on it, but like, let's call him on it. Let's hold him accountable and then let's let him redeem himself. But Ali is so sweet that I genuinely feel like if she called him on it, she would have made him a better father. Well, I'm telling myself that anyway. I was loving the way Ethan interacted with her ex in the mediation hearings, and just this way this book was like the rebirth of Ali into this like strong woman and the mother that she was meant to be, and she was really able to like show up for her kids. It was such a sweet read. I gave it 4.5 stars. I enjoyed the pacing, I enjoyed the writing style, and I want to know, does this author have like other great reads? Because I'm in. I really liked this. Oh, we're down to the final 2. I feel like I've been talking for hours. I have. Then I read Abby Jimenez's The Situationship. Oh, another novella win. So we have Maddie, who's a travel nurse, and she isn't looking for a relationship, but she can't ignore the chemistry between her and Doug, who is a super sweet farmer that she meets after a run-in involving the town's pig mascot, Kevin Bacon. And even though she's not planning to stay in Minnesota long, she might for a fling, or maybe something more will happen. For those late to the game, Maddie is Emma's bestie from Just for the Summer, and Doug is Jacob's bestie from Yours Truly. This book was such a tease. I want the full story right now. Are we ever getting Maddie and Doug's story? Because if we're not, I'm pissed. I'm pissed because I'm so invested. It was so short and yet so punchy. Like, I adore Maddie. I adore her mean banter because I know it's a defense mechanism and she's trying to have that shield up, but she's also like, she protects the people that she cares about. And then we have Doug. He's the ultimate carer. He will protect you, Maddie, okay? He is a ride or die for those that he loves, and I legit needed more. How is it that the 2 novellas I read this month have got me in such a chokehold? Then, don't even start me on the 2 teaser chapters for Say You'll Remember Me. A grumpy vet who admits he's wrong in the best way possible. This man is a green flag. She already seems like the sweetest girl. I absolutely need this arc. I need to find out how to get on that list. I did see a TikTok that said that the elderly lady that was experiencing the memory loss, like disorientation and needed help, and Just for the Summer, she had the granddaughter that came to collect her from the local diner, and that this book is about that granddaughter. Abby Jimenez, I freaking adore you. Like, I didn't even know I wanted her story, but you best believe I do. Again, Abby Jimenez can write her grocery list and I will read it because I adore her. And then finally, the final book I read for the month was a big one, and it was Mike's book club read, and I put it for last because I was really worried it would slump me, and it was meant to be Catch-22, but we weren't vibing with that, my sister and I, so we begged him to change it, and he's changed it to Stephen King's 11/22/63. Now, this is my first Stephen King book. My husband's a big fan. The Stand is actually his all-time favorite read, and I saw that Desi read this, and I convinced Mike that he should change it to this because I knew he wanted to read it, and I knew it was up his alley, but I'd had a confirmation from a girly pop. And I wanted to give Stephen King a go, but I'm not a big horror fan. But the good thing is this book is not horror. So we have on November 22nd, 1963, 3 shots are fired, President Kennedy is killed, and history has changed forever. But could it be different? In 2011, we have Jake Epping, an English teacher from Maine, who travels back in time to stop the Kennedy assassination. He leaves behind like modern life. He enters like this time period of like classic American cars and diners and Elvis. And along the way, he falls in love with a girl named Sadie, a high school librarian. But as the fateful date of 11/22/63 approaches, he crosses paths with none other than Lee Harvey Oswald. Wow, this book was a wild ride. Like, I actually really loved it. I found it very thought-provoking. It was fast-paced. It was action-packed. It was suspenseful. I gave it 4.5 stars. I was so close to giving it 5. It might be one that I change in the future, but right now it's sitting on 4.5. Jake was a really admirable guy. Like, it's so hard to unpack this story without spoiling things, but he pretty much did the right thing all of the time to protect those that he cared about, even if sometimes that was questionable. What I love about him is also my critique about him as well, though, because what was his motive to do all of this in the first place? Like, he was kind of portrayed as this like divorced loser that had nothing better going on in his life, and he goes off and does like all of these selfless things for people that he has a connection to them, but it just kind of felt like I didn't understand where his interest came from. Like, he could have just been like, nah, that seems like a lot. It just, yeah, the motive, I didn't quite fully understand the motive, I guess, so that didn't quite fit for me. But this book did keep me guessing. The way things kept circling back and repeating themselves was really intriguing to me. It was super well researched. I loved the way it dealt with time travel laws and like what they would potentially be. And there was the obvious ones, and then there was some that I was like, that's really interesting. Like, I like that. Now, I've heard a lot of conspiracy theories over the years around the assassination, and I actually felt like this book debunked them all. We have like really vivid, flawed, realistic characters, and I actually felt like I was teleported into that time, which felt a little bit like a dodgy circus, in that it felt bright and it felt colourful and entertaining, but it also felt a little unsafe. Like, the lion may get out and bite me while I'm at the circus. Now, one thing that Desi said, and I'll back her up on this because I was like, whatever, and she did say the same thing, was that this did not feel like a big book. which is so surprising to me because this book is actually huge. But it was so fast paced and so interesting that I just devoured it. Does this also mean I'm like an adult reader now? Is she cultured? Probably not. I'll be back in my smutty romance era soon. The ending of the book did break me, but I feel like all of the best books do. And if there's one thing I've learned about time travel through all the films and media is you don't mess with the past. If given the opportunity, leave it alone. Wow, that's it. I've been talking for almost an hour and a half. I have no idea what this is going to edit down to, but I read a lot. I do not think that I will read nearly as much in the month of October. I'm actually moving house tomorrow and meant to be going back into full-time work soon. So I don't know that I'll be able to, I definitely won't be able to keep up with how much I was able to read this month, but I had a really great month. I picked up books that I've been meaning to read for a while. I love Six Scorched Roses. I love The Situationship. I loved Out on a Limb. I loved The Woman. Like, I read a really good variety. I'm really happy with what I read. I would love to know. I need some, actually, I do not need any more recommendations for books, but I'm always intrigued. Like, I want to know what other people are reading that's 5 stars, because I want to make sure I've got some more 5 stars coming my way. But that's it from me. Cheers. Until next time. Bye.